eyes. They're two of your most precious possessions. 90% of the information that travels to your brain is supplied through your eyes. They're a miracle of nature, your windows to the world. With them, you can capture the magic of a sunset, the smile of a child, the colours of our parks and gardens, and the whiteness of freshly fallen snow. They assist you in learning, and they'll help you earn a living. Without doubt, our sight is our richest sense. Without eyes, there's nothing. No colour, no beauty, just a cold, black nothing. As we said, they're two of your most precious possessions. Hello there, and welcome to the easy guide to eye safety in the workplace. Now, during this video, we'll cover various aspects of eye safety. We'll look at how the eye works, we'll discuss the various hazards to the eyes, and how to protect against those hazards. And finally, what to do when injury occurs. But firstly, how the eye works. Many liken the way the eyes do their job to the way a camera works. Once an object's within the eye's field of vision, it reflects certain rays of light according to its size, shape and colour. These light rays pass through the cornea, which acts like a clear window at the front of the eye. Once past the cornea, the light enters the eye through the pupil, which is a hole at the centre of the iris. The pupil expands and contracts to regulate the amount of light that enters the eye. Light then passes through to the lens, which is highly flexible and changes its shape so as to focus objects at varying distances onto the retina at the back of the eye. When an object's close by, the lens becomes more rounded in order to produce a sharp picture on the retina. However, when the object becomes distant, the lens becomes flattened in order to maintain clarity of image. As we get older, the lens loses its ability to change its shape so easily, thus the need for reading glasses in many of the aged. The retina is made up of over 1 million nerve threads which respond to the light focused on it. This response is carried to the brain by the optic nerve. The eye is an extremely fragile organ. It's got very little natural protection. Both the cornea and the lens contain very few blood vessels, and therefore can take a long time to heal once they're injured. And if you happen to damage the nerves of the retina, they won't heal at all. So protection for the eyes against hazards is a must. The Royal Eye and Ear Hospital in Victoria treat in excess of 100,000 outpatients every year. And the crazy thing is that apart from being incredibly painful, the figures show that most injuries to the eyes are preventable. Estimates show that as many as 95% of eye injuries treated in the casualty departments of hospitals could have been avoided by more care and more attention to basic safety precautions. So, what are the common causes of eye injury? Well, the three main areas of risk to the eyes are physical hazards, chemical hazards, and radiation hazards. Of physical hazards, the most common risk is that of foreign bodies. Foreign bodies in the eye can range from things like dust and flying particles to high-impact pieces of metal that can penetrate the surface of the eye. There are many different types of work that will produce this hazard, and it's important to remember that not only the worker doing the job is at risk, but in fact anybody within the general area is susceptible to eye injury. The motor mower is a good example, probably because those of us who don't use a mower at work more than likely use one at home. Now, many of us would cringe at the obvious danger of this, a police .38 pistol where the bullet travels at a speed of about 1,000 feet per second. And yet we think nothing about the dangers of a motor mower where a projectile can actually travel faster at about 1,300 feet per second. The main rule with any eye injury is to remain calm and respond quickly. Always see a doctor with any major injury to or around the eye. If you happen to get an object that's penetrated your eye, do not, repeat, do not attempt to remove it. Trying to remove foreign objects in the eyes is an instinctive reaction, but doctors and hospitals tell us that far more damage is caused to the eye by pulling things out than by the original penetration. Instead, try and remain calm and protect the eye from anything possibly touching it. A drinking cup's an effective way of further protecting the eye. Tape it into place and see a doctor immediately. Remember, never attempt to pull the foreign object out of your eyes yourself. Sometimes it's acting as a plug and preventing the contents of the eye, which is liquid under pressure, from coming out. Impact or blunt force is another typical hazard to the eye. A very common example of this is a worker walking into something that's protruding from a machine or a shelf. These injuries can often highlight the need for better housekeeping or improved lighting conditions. A common problem with blunt impacts is that with little to no external visible signs, there can be substantial internal damage. This can lead to loss of sight from a secondary bleeding inside the eye, which may take place several days after the accident's occurred. Again, if there's the slightest doubt, seek medical advice. Chemical hazards. There's no more horrendous injury in the workplace than a chemical splash or spill to the eye, so great care must be taken when handling chemicals. Alkalines are particularly dangerous near eyes, even more so than acids. This is because alkaline actually combines with the protein of the eye to cause a particularly deep blinding burn. Usually an alkaline burn will go so deep that sight can never be restored. Lime is another very hazardous substance to the eyes. It's treated very casually around homes and sports fields, and yet many people are blind today as a result of lime burns. But the list goes on and on. Detergents, paint removers, adhesives, pesticides. The safest rule of thumb with chemicals is trust none of them. Treat all chemicals, whether solid, liquid or gas, as if they were extremely hazardous to the eyes. If a chemical enters the eye, again, remain calm and move quickly. Remember that the chemical will cause untold damage to your eyes for as long as it's in them. So flood your eyes with water immediately and consistently for at least 15 to 20 minutes. There have been cases where great long-term damage to the eyes occurred because of victims searching unsuccessfully for an antidote after a chemical splash. The Eye and Ear Hospital advises that by getting your head straight under water or the eye washing equipment, you'll do two things. You'll dilute the chemical and wash it out. With running water, run the water over the bridge of the nose for at least 15 minutes and then seek medical advice. All workers working with chemicals should read the material safety data sheet that accompanies the chemical and be well versed in the specific nature of the hazard, how to prevent injury and first aid procedures. A final note of interest on chemical hazards is that under safety legislation, workers can actually be prosecuted for failing to follow safety procedures when handling hazardous goods. They can also be prosecuted for failing to wear their personal protective equipment and failing to keep that equipment maintained to the best of their ability. So it's in your best interest to follow safety procedures very carefully when handling chemicals. Radiation hazards. Exposure to various sources of radiation can seriously damage the cornea, lens and retina. More common hazards are ultraviolet radiation that can be caused by exposure to an arc welding flash, lasers, ultraviolet lamps, or highly reflective workplaces like building sites, or even the outdoors. It's important that workers exposed to these hazards wear the appropriate tight-fitting UV-absorbing glasses, and that these glasses are properly maintained. Remember that cracked or broken goggles can permit unwanted UV rays through to the eye. In addition to this, adequate screening should always be erected around welding so as to protect other workers' eyes. Poor lighting. Lighting is an important consideration when talking about eye safety. Adequate lighting can prevent things like eye strain, fatigue, headaches, slowed perception, reduced productivity, and a greater chance of accidents. In many workplace situations, we depend almost entirely on artificial light. Good lighting is also important to assist in hazard recognition, maximise the working distance, keep the pupil diameter as small as possible, that's to minimise the amount of damaging radiation that can enter the eye, and make the use of eye protectors less restricting. If your workplace has areas where the light is so dim your eyes can't work efficiently, or if there are enormous contrasts of light in your work area and dark in the background, or so much glare that you find it hard to focus, then that workplace has definite lighting problems that should be looked at. A couple of relatively inexpensive ways of improving dark conditions is to set up a cleaning and maintenance schedule for not only your artificial light sources, but your natural light sources as well. Further to this, lighting can be complemented by using suitable light-reflecting colours on the walls or floors. Contact lenses. A much safer alternative to contact lenses in most workplaces is to wear prescription safety glasses. If you work in an area that's particularly dusty, wearing contact lenses can cause great aggravation to the eyes. And if you work with chemicals, wearing contact lenses can increase the damage to the eyes if you happen to get a chemical spill. If you do happen to wear contact lenses, it's a good idea to let your safety rep and the first aid people know. So how can eye injury be prevented? Well, the obvious answer to this question, and the one that'll spring to most people's minds immediately, is personal protective equipment in the form of goggles, glasses, helmets and shields. And we couldn't agree more. When used properly, they certainly have their place. We'd like to suggest some questions that could be asked of yourselves and hopefully answered in a way so that you don't even have to start thinking about personal eye protection. In other words, instead of using personal protective equipment as a cure-all, think about how to reduce or eliminate the hazard in the first place. Ask yourself questions like, what are the particular hazards we're exposed to in this workplace? Is there an alternative process we could use that would eliminate this hazard altogether? Could we substitute a particular chemical with a less hazardous material? When selecting new equipment, are improved safety features a healthy part of the selection criteria? Do we pay enough attention to proper housekeeping? Could we use better manual handling techniques to eliminate the handling of hazardous materials? Could we enclose the processes that use hazardous chemicals or generate harmful radiation? Could we use better guarding, or is our current guarding maintained adequately? Are hazardous areas properly designated, signposted and access restricted to properly trained and approved personnel only? Could we use fixed or mobile screens to eliminate some problems? Now just take 10 minutes at the end of this video and ask yourselves the above questions. Look at the hazards in your place of work and think about some ways, if any, these hazards could be eliminated. Your answers could not only save your company many dollars in compensation payouts, but more importantly, it might just save you or a workmate from a terrible accident, even a loss of sight. Now obviously there are some workplace practices that just can't be done another way. So if you're unable to reduce or eliminate the hazard altogether, then appropriate, tight-fitting and well-maintained personal protective equipment must be worn. And believe me, your eyes are worth it. A good habit with safety goggles or masks is to bend your head down when you remove them. This will prevent any lodged substances from falling into your eyes. Finally, take a look at these safety glasses. The person whose eye these glasses saved, let's call him John, confessed that it was the very first time he'd ever worn safety glasses while grinding. Now, as far as John was concerned, it would never happen to him. He was playing an insane version of Russian roulette, and he was lucky, incredibly lucky. As we said at the start of this video, 95% of eye injuries treated in the casualty departments of hospitals were caused by people just like John taking safety shortcuts. Like John, these people also thought it wouldn't happen to them. But as you can see, it did. I'll repeat, your eyes are your richest sense, your most precious possessions. Please don't take shortcuts. Remember, without them, there's a cold, black nothing.